did that.
Yeah.
It's a weird feeling.
It is. That's a good way to put
If
it.
there's anything I can do, you guys let me know.
Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
It's not April yet.
What's April?
You're in the campaign mode already?
I'd like to call the order the August. I'm really rushing things. John, you got me nervous. August 6th, pre-council meeting, Mayor Bob Odekirk presiding.
We'll begin with roll call. Mayor Odekirk.
Here.
Good job.
Councilman Dickinson.
Here.
Councilwoman Gavin. Here. Councilman Girl.
Here.
Councilman Hug.
I'll be here in October.
Councilman Morris.
Here.
Councilman Mudrin.
Here.
Councilwoman Coleman.
Did you want to have any comments tonight, right, Laura? Here.
Councilman Turk.
Here.
First on tonight's agenda is a presentation by Holstein Redevelopment for the redevelopment plan for Riverwalk Homes.
And if I could, I just want to make a few just introductory comments. Please come to the Speakers Bureau, but a couple of objectives tonight. First is to have the representatives of the Holstein Company just recap again what we talked about, I think, let's see, a little over a month, maybe 2 months. And then but that's going to be very brief because a little bit more time will be spent on what they heard and what information they gathered from many public meetings. And then they'll focus on what changes has been made to the redevelopment plans that they'll be talking about tonight. Now we're going to try and keep that to kind of this 20 to 30 minutes because the last and probably the most important item is to really begin and to get direction from the council. Is there one or two, of these plans that the council feels that ultimately they are more supportive of approving as the council, because ultimately we do have, as they will mention, a deadline to submit in September, the final redevelopment plan in accordance with the I think settlement agreement. So anyway, keep that in mind. And that's really what hopefully we spend most time on after this presentation. However, we did also try to get the word out, so if any citizen didn't have a chance to hear the presentation in person, or hopefully if they didn't, they listened to the original presentation 2 months ago. But we also indicated that after the presentation, there'd be an opportunity for the public to give any final comments they wish to give to the mayor and council. So it's kind of that unofficial kind of public hearing to get any other final comments. So just wanted to remind the council of that. So with that, we have two individuals, Peter Holston and Andrea Keeney of Holston Company.
Thank you, David. Good afternoon, Mayor Odekirk and council members. I'm Peter Holston, president of Holston Real Estate Development Company. With me is Andrea Keeney, senior development manager for Holston. Andrea will take us through briefly the scenarios that we presented to everybody, and then I will spend a little time on the comments, and then we will talk about some further options and encourage as much input as possible. So, Andrea?
We are waiting for technical glitch. I'm sorry. I guess I can start off by saying Peter had mentioned, and I think David mentioned as well, we've had a variety of community meetings. We had one with St. Pat's and Kappa, which was open to the broader public. And then we had two resident meetings along with a meeting with St. John's. And those have all taken place within the last month to month and a half. So as David mentioned, we're going to go through the 5 scenarios that we've previously presented to you all, and then go through community comment. And I believe that there are probably some people here as well. I don't know if we open up to public comment, but I'm sure that there are others that want to give additional comment.
See next slide.
Sure, so next slide, please. Okay, so just to reorient everyone, this is the existing site plan at Riverwalk Homes. So 356 units housed in 7 buildings, along with a community center, which is labeled E. Next slide, please. So we've gone through these 5 scenarios with you all. I think a lot of people in the public have seen them as well, but we just want to kind of reacquaint everyone with the 5 scenarios before we talk about them. The first scenario, and both actually the first and second scenarios, are scenarios where we demolish 2 of the existing buildings at the south end of the site, so buildings F and G. As most council members will recall from their site visits down there, those are the 2 wood frame buildings that are probably in the worst shape of all of the buildings. So the plan for these 2 first scenarios is to demolish those 37 units housed in 2 buildings and then keep the remaining buildings operating as is. So we can switch to the next slide, please. So the 319 units on this first scenario are operated as is, which is 100% PBV vouchers or project-based voucher units. Removing buildings F and G, again, 37 units, and demolition of the 2 buildings F and G paid for through operations, which is about $277,500. We're estimating $7,500 a unit for that. The existing units or existing buildings are comprised of studio 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units. There is a demand for all of these unit types, as is shown, because there's quite a substantial wait list to get into Riverwalk Homes. So the city purchased this property for about $15 million. And we've talked through this before, but there were CDBG funds that were set aside of about $3.6 million that helped to pay back a portion of that $15 million. So this $11.4 million is what we're modeling in this first scenario and how quickly we can pay that back. And being paid back through operations takes about 17 years, operating those 319 units as is. The capital repairs. So a lot of people have questioned the current buildings and the shape that they're in. Right now, there's $2.6 million, actually in excess of $2.6 million sitting with HUD. We've put together, I think all council members have seen this, but we put together a plan showing the repairs that we'd like to make if the buildings are operated as is. And it's about, I believe, close to $1 million. We're working on prioritizing those repairs, which we'll get to council members as well if it hasn't been provided already. But so this is the first scenario. Again, 17 years if we're to operate those 319 units as is. The city would be paid back that $11.4 million. So next slide, please. Same site plan on this scenario because it's pretty much the same scenario. The only difference here is, next slide, please. In this scenario, we're not only paying back the $11.4 million, we're also paying back $10 million of estimated legal fees that the city spent through its decade or so working on the acquisition of this project. And so modeling that out, it takes about 30 years to pay the city back that total of about $21.4 million. And again, capital repairs would be done in this scenario as well through the existing replacement reserve with HUD. Next slide, please. So scenario 3 is one of the first redevelopment, so to speak, scenarios. This is where we demolish some of the buildings that are existing and retain 3 buildings, which are shown on the site plan as A, C, and D, along with the community center, which is E. Next slide, please. So these 177 units would be redeveloped through 2 phases of redevelopment. So typically we do redevelopment at about 100 units per phase. And so given that there's 177 units, we've broken it into 2 phases of redevelopment. This would be a mod rehab of the existing units. So we would not change existing configurations of the units or the buildings that are retained. The units would stay the same size, and there would be a mod rehab of $75 a square foot. So some people have asked what a mod rehab is. A mod rehab is not taking the buildings down to the studs. It's essentially doing repairs like new kitchens, new bathrooms, exterior upgrades, things of the sort, some of which will likely be done prior to getting to this through the capital repairs, assuming the council signs off on that. This scenario, along with the balance, the remaining two others after this, all of them pay back the city that $11.4 million. On this scenario, it's paid back both through operations and also through the capital budget. So when we close on each one of the subphases of redevelopment, a pro rata portion of whatever outstanding amount of the city purchase price is there that will be paid down to the city at the time of financial closing. In this scenario, we're estimating the purchase price to be paid by 2024, and that's assuming that the Illinois Housing Development Authority, who would be providing us with tax credits for this project, would allow us to get financing in 2021 and 2024. The total project costs on this scenario is almost 35 million, and we have a financing gap of about 2.8 million. A $2.8 million financing gap is something that we believe that we could find the funds to fill that gap. Moving on to scenario 4. Next slide, please. Scenario 4 is the same site plan. The only difference in this scenario is that the number of units has gone down from 177 units to 144 units. The reason being is, next slide, please. The reason being is this is a new configuration of the unit. So as opposed to doing a mod rehab, which is what was shown in the prior slide or the prior scenario, this would be a full or gut rehab. So we'd be taking all the buildings down to the studs, we'd be reconfiguring the unit layouts, probably adding about 20% to each unit, so making each unit 20% larger, but still keeping the studio 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units. And the city purchase price, again, as I mentioned before, would be paid back by both operations and capital budget and estimated to be paid back by 2024. So the total project cost for this is about $49 million, and the financing gap is $10 million. And again, 2 subphases of development. Our final scenario we were asked to model, this is similar to the Water's Edge development in Joliet, which is entirely townhomes. So next slide, please. We've taken this down to 115 units, 115 townhome style units, which is the minimum number of units required by the HUD settlement agreement. It has a combination of 2 and 3 bedroom units, as does Water's Edge. So the 2 bedroom units will be about 1,200 square feet, 3 bedroom units, 1,500 square feet. And all of these units would also be project-based voucher units. So the existing tenants that are there, we would retain 115 of those families. Construction costs for new construction is about $200 a square foot, so it's modeled as such. The city purchase price, again, is repaid through this scenario. And this is done because it's 115 units, which is less than what is shown previously of about 177. This would be done in one phase of redevelopment. The issue here is that the project costs are $58.4 million, and we have a financing gap of about $24 million. Keep in mind that the project costs are increased in this scenario because we also have demolition that we have to do for the overall site to get the site ready. And then we're also carrying the acquisition price in this model. So the next slide, please. Is a summary of the scenarios. We're just keeping this on here so we can refer back to it when we have a discussion with you all. And then the next slide, Peter will walk us through, actually the following 2 slides. We had asked as part of the community meetings that people reach out to us. We set up an email address. I think we received about 6 emails. Some of them are rather lengthy, but we tried to summarize what we received in those emails up on the next 2 slides. So Peter will walk us through that.
Thanks, Andrea. So as you can see on the first slide, I'll read these. These are some comments that we received in writing. The redevelopment plan should be centered around river enhancements. So what we're looking at there is, in addition to just having housing along the river, that there would be other uses such as commercial, obviously walkways and other things that are benefited from the river. Housing should be mixed income, not entirely affordable. Our comment to that one is ideally that's right. It's just in this case the affordable rents are basically almost twice the market rate rents. So it's This is a situation based on the housing situation in Joliet where we've actually got higher income coming in than if it was market rate. Too many rental homes in the St. John's neighborhood. We understand that, I guess a lot of the single family in that neighborhood are rental. At one point, they were probably for sale. Payback of the city's acquisition price should not be a top priority. So in this case, that money would be spent in other ways, perhaps at this site or perhaps for other city priorities. The city of Joliet needs a comprehensive quality of life plan for all residents. It's hard to dispute that, and I imagine that's something that the council deals with every several years, so I'm not sure where that stands. Concern about displacement of families. That's one of our concerns as well, that if we are to move a substantial number of residents out of this development, they're by the court settlement, they're supposed to be first offered opportunities in the city of Joliet, followed by Will County, and we're just not so sure how that would be received by area residents. The redevelopment plan should include retail opportunities. We would definitely agree with that. We're a little bit concerned about the amount of business that could be generated, especially on that side of the river. We also understand that there's still some vacant retail space on the east side of the river. And while it would be nice to do a mixed-use development there, we're very concerned about the viability of the non-housing part. Concerned that Riverwalk Homes warehouses poor people. That's one way to look at it. That's not our way of looking at it. For many of these folks, if they didn't have Riverwalk, they'd be on the street. The next slide, please. Thoroughly analyze buildings to determine if they're worth saving. We've done 100% inspection of every building, every common area, and every apartment. We've developed a list of capital improvements that we need to do as soon as possible, totaling nearly $1 million. And we determined that there's a couple smaller buildings that are really hard to justify keeping. So we would probably recommend taking those down. Concern about project being owned by LLC. Riverwalk Homes, when it was Evergreen Terrace, was owned by a corporation or an LLC, and I think most people know that it was a family of investors. Once the city took the property back, they became owner and then put it into an LLC with my company and the city being the members. The city's the controlling member, which means they have the final say. We are the managing member because that's what we do for a living. Interest in social services provided and how they will be paid for. The resident services that our nonprofit affiliate provides is centered around three major areas. Workforce development, which means training for jobs and job placement. The second item would be resident well-being and household success. That's to hope that we can make everybody that lives in Riverwalk successful in however that's defined. Children in school, children having a good opportunity at higher education, even college. Minimum domestic violence, minimum abuse of their health, and basically people that have happy, healthy children and happy, healthy adults functioning for the good of everybody. And then finally, community building, meaning Riverwalk Homes' place in the greater community. Is it an asset or is it a liability? Obviously, we want to turn it into an asset, and we want to do that from within by working with the residents and also reaching out to the community to help us with volunteer work. Cost-benefit analysis from Riverwalk Homes development for surrounding area, property values, tax revenues, etc. Riverwalk Homes presently pays about $500,000 a year in property taxes. That was based on the latest tax bills that we got. I am unaware of Riverwalk at the present time bringing down other people's property values. If that is, we haven't heard about it. But again, we want to make the development an asset, not a liability to the community. Conflict of interest for Holston to be involved in the redevelopment efforts. We were asked by the city of Joliet years ago to join their efforts as a consultant on what to do with Evergreen Terrace. Outside counsel from Joliet said if you're going to continue with HUD, if you're going to continue with redevelopment that requires public finance, you really need to make Holston a partner because the city, that's not their primary business. So we were made a partner based on that. Holston should also approach area businesses and schools for feedback. We definitely intend to do that. So those are the comments that we got in writing. I'm sure there's many other comments. I just want to say in closing that we would love nothing more than to have Riverwalk be a mixed income, mixed use development. We're just not sure yet at this point whether the economics of the area would support that. We have done mixed income and mixed use in Chicago. The economics up there are considerably different. This is a wonderful working class neighborhood, and there's only so much money to go around, and we're very concerned that if we do something other than housing along the river, at least on the west side of the river, that those businesses will not survive. They won't have enough business. Again, we're looking at the 5 scenarios that we have put forth, and they can be changed in any way. We wanted them to be quite different from one another to give you an idea of what we could do. We can certainly, do less units, do different types of rehabs. Just keep in mind that the more money we spend on construction, we have to go to IDA and other public funds for that type of money. And it's very competitive. It can take a number of years. I think where we'd like to do with it is keep the majority of the units, fix them all up in a reasonable sense, go through the tenancy and make sure that we're only keeping the people that respect others and respect their home, and then try and get much closer to the community in terms of working together for the future of the development. So we're open to any questions.
Peter, and if I could, Mayor, just 2 other quick questions on scenario 5, because I think it ties in. I think we've had a lot of discussion, and we've seen how the Joliet Housing Authority, how they, and as we understand HUD's kind of vision going forward, they are trying to incentivize, support, and have their vision more of the townhome or that type of development as opposed to these high-rise. I just want you to comment, is that more in line, but how about some of the others that would continue on? And then the second thing, I think even one of our council members mentioned about checking with the Joliet Housing Authority. Is there a possibility the Joliet Housing Authority could help with some of the financing gap on one or the other of
David, I
these?
think I can answer that. We addressed that about 3 years ago when you guys made your first round of plans, or even maybe before that. And at the time, HUD rejected the Joliet Housing Authority. We were told, you probably could tell me, but HUD was not going to approve Joliet Housing Authority being involved in this.
In any way, shape,
Now, we were actually up in Chicago and asked them point blank, and they said no.
And we actually did call the Joliet Housing Authority. I believe Councilwoman Quillman asked us to just reach out to see if there were capital funds available, and they do not have any capital funds available. They're using whatever capital, I think their resources are scarce to start with, but whatever capital funds they do have available, they're using in their own developments.
All right, thank you.
Could I ask a question? Who is going to?
Excuse me, ma'am, you don't have the floor. We're going to open up the public comment in a minute, okay?
David, to answer your first question regarding townhomes, we would love to do townhomes. We actually looked at doing townhomes in the village of Riverdale, south suburb, and the cost of putting up the townhomes would be greater than what we could sell them for. So we would have to go to Cook County to get actually cash subsidy from their home money to produce the townhomes. In a rental scenario, the townhomes might work as rentals if you had a whole bunch of them, but again, you would have this funding gap. So we like townhomes. We're doing townhomes in Chicago right now. but there's at considerably higher selling prices and rents.
Thank you.
We can open up to the public first. Unless you have more to add.
No. Yeah, I mean, I just think the one thing we do want to mention is that HUD, so we closed, or the city closed on its acquisition of Riverwalk Homes a year ago, September 27th. So we are supposed to get back to HUD. Well, we have to renew our HAP contract, so we keep the existing rents. We have to get our paperwork into them by August 20th, I believe it is, because they need about a month to put all that paperwork together. There are a couple things in the settlement agreement that we're gonna need council feedback on, at least now, if we're not to give a full-blown redevelopment plan. One is that the community center in the settlement agreement is said to be moved to 363 North Broadway. So if that's not gonna happen, I believe, and Marty, you would know better than I would, but I believe that we have to reapproach Judge Norgal about that to ask that we can keep it in the place that it is right now.
Which we recommend.
Which we would recommend. It's in good shape, it's a good size, it does its job and it's in good shape. So, but we do need feedback on that. And then the other thing is if we're gonna demolish those two buildings, F and G, we're also gonna have to let HUD know that, because that would be a modification to our HAP contract. The HAP contract would no longer be for the 356 units, it would scale down to 319 units because we'd be removing 37 of the units. So those are two things by August 20th that we are gonna need feedback on.
And we'll open up for public comment right now. If you could limit it to 3 minutes, please, we'd appreciate it.
Yes, I have.
Good afternoon.
Let's come forward, ma'am.
You have to go to the mic.
Yes, you can't be heard on TV otherwise. Can we take the microphone to her?
You need to, no?
She's first, yeah.
Okay.
Take that to her.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Introduce myself. I'm a retired nurse, RN, public health. Who will occupy these units when they're built? With the population going down, people living because they cannot accept the hardship of the tax number? Why all this brick building in your heads instead of taking care of the people right now that are walking the street, limiting families because of money, which is sad? It is horrible. And you introduce more criminal activity. I'm a public health nurse, I've been around, plus a penitentiary nurse. And this is nothing but brickhead leadership. Do you have any comment? I'm disgusted. Money being a priority. And Chicago, the latest in the Tribune, telling Emmanuel to get out. He too. Brick comes first instead of the person, instead of children, instead of, in the schools, there is corruption in almost every business. And I could tell, I've been around. I'm a veteran nurse. I took care of our boys that were tortured by the Japanese. And the influence is here. It is satanic. And I know it. And I am fighting right now Jim Moustis, who to me is Speaker of the House, who had me hurt. He told me to go pray to your Jesus. The taxes he's putting on our people are ill-used. That building down Colorado is an insult if you go there. A woman's touch is needed there. That brick wall off of 30, it hinders senior citizens' outlook on hopefully living more. Over noise, air conditioning throughout the whole day, open doors, telling me to mind my own business. Put a stalking order on me and I'm in a wheelchair and it passed through the courts. I'll tell you, this Will County is a mess. Get off your bricks. Take care of the people. And money. I have so many friends that had to leave Roots Aren't they happy? We are uprooting like China and Mexico, uprooting, coming here.
All right, that's 3 minutes. Thank you, ma'am.
I wish I could say more. It's
Mayor,
disgusting.
just to remind the public too, is if you don't think that's enough time, then you can always submit something in writing.
It's disgusting.
Your Honor, thank you. I just want to say that, I don't know if people realize this, but almost 600 units are next door to Riverwalk, and that's the Joliet Housing Authority. And I encourage people to do as I do. I walk there, not just during the day, I walk there during the night, and I can tell you that one of the safest areas in the city of Joliet right now is Riverwalk. I walk through it at night. I walk through our development at night. I was there a couple nights ago, and some police officers came in. And we have more problems on our Joliet Housing Authority side than Riverwalk does. And there is a demand for housing for our less income individuals. We have a huge waiting list right now at the Joliet Housing Authority for people to come in. We have 5 buildings right now, which is right next door to Riverwalk, which, like I said, houses close to 600 people. So there's a need for it. As many people know, our housing development on the on the east side is going to be coming down, our Fairview development. And I was here over the last 20 years, as Mike knows, so I was part of some of those discussions that took place years and years ago. And I was very concerned some of the reasons that some of the residents at that time, and some of them aren't even here anymore, don't even live in the area, but they kept referring to them as those people. And I thought that was just totally disgusting. So what I'm doing right now is, a lot of the residents at Fairview want to stay in Joliet. So I'm working with a lot of those residents. I'm going to try and bring them into the Kappa area, into the St. Pat's area. I'm working hard because I know that they're going to tell me that's not true, that there's no discrimination, so they should have no problems with having them as their new neighbors. In any case, I think that you should look at the options of keeping this development going, and because there's a strong need for housing for our less fortunate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My concern, first, let me apologize for being late. Maybe they discussed it, maybe they didn't. But I was under the impression that they were going to tear down some of the buildings over in Riverwalk Homes. Where would those people that live there, are they going to help them housing? Would they restore? My daughter and my grandkids live there, and I'm concerned about where would they go? What can we do? What was going to be done? Shoot.
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Hello. Yes, we're looking at a potential 37 units coming down. I believe 11 of them, Andrea, are 3 bedrooms. The rest are 1s and 2s. We have turnover. We researched our turnover, and I spoke in air last time we talked. I thought it was at 50%, but it's at 25%. So that's still turnover. And as we have turnover, we could move those people into the buildings that we're going to keep. But we would have to find new homes for those 11 3-bedroom households because we don't have any 3 bedrooms in the big buildings. So that would mean giving them vouchers, mobility assistance, helping them relocate, finding options in the city or the county.
Thank you.
And how much is the rent?
Any other comments?
I'm Bob Nogtrebe. I live on Western Avenue. I'm with the Cathedral Area Preservation Association. It seems unusual, Peter, that the units at Evergreen Terrace or Riverwalk pay more than the homes in the surrounding area. It would seem that the surrounding area is probably lower cost because of Evergreen Terrace. I think probably 30 years ago that was a stable neighborhood, largely occupied by owner-occupiers. And it would seem that perhaps the reason for that is Evergreen Terrace, and if Evergreen Terrace went away, maybe that area would improve tremendously. It also is a prime riverfront property right across from the city center, and I think a lot of people feel that It is a break on any development in the city center as well as in itself. And it would, all right, that's enough for now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kathy Nashis. I live at 428 Buell. I'm concerned that the only plan that Holston has provided, which shows the city exercising its right to non-renew the 241 units, which is allowed under the settlement agreement, is the townhome project, which is by far the most expensive. Slide that I saw that's not in this presentation is that those units would cost over $500,000 apiece. They seem to be saying that there's no less expensive viable alternative for the 115 units that would remain. Since the city has only one opportunity to non-renew the 241 units by the September 30th deadline, but then tonight I hear some deadline of August 20th, so now I don't know for sure what the deadline is. I would have hoped that a more reasonable, less expensive option for the management of the 115 units would have been presented. I feel that by only presenting this very expensive option, Holston's leading the council in a direction that would maybe make them feel that they should not exercise their right to non-renew. Many of us here hope that the council will exercise its right to non-renew and only manage 115 units.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Pat McGuire, 1210 Glenwood, 60435, and State Center, District 43. So under the scenarios which have been presented, it appears that from a couple dozen to a couple hundred families would be displaced. And there's been some mention, there's been a question asked, where would they go? And I would trust that the council, as it considers these different scenarios, would do its best to ensure that there is available housing for whatever number of families will be displaced, and that the housing, which I would hope would be available to those families displaced from Riverwalk, be comparable. That is, if 20 studios are lost, 20 studios would be available. If 25 one-bedroom units would be lost, 25 replacement properties, rental properties somewhere in our community would be available. If you would, could you tell me if the city has begun to look into that?
There's not, but what neighborhood would you suggest that we put them in?
It's my understanding that if, for the current residents of Riverwalk, if a renter's unit is being rehabbed or demolished, that then the project-based voucher becomes portable.
Right.
Okay.
So, and we have to keep 115 within the city of Joliet. So if we're to clear out that site, put the cost aside, where would you put them?
Is there an inventory of HUD, of properties approved by HUD, which can be rented by holders of Section 8 vouchers?
Well, what we do know, and correct me on the number, what's the waiting list to get inside the Riverwalk homes right now?
It's about 600.
So you have 600 families trying to get in. So no, I don't know where the replacement housing is. Presumably, those 600 families would be taking those homes if they existed. So okay. I don't know.
Okay, if I can assist in helping to identify where the
Sure.
rental properties are, please get a hold of me.
Absolutely, thank you.
Mayor, I have a question.
Yes.
This is for Holston, Mr. Holston. The only vouchers that would be good to move, say, out of state if someone wanted to go to Kansas or California or Florida are the ones that would be if their homes are torn down. Is that correct? Or is anyone available to go on those vouchers? Because that's what we were told in the very, very beginning, that if folks wanted to go anywhere in the country, they could get a voucher to go elsewhere if they didn't want to live in Illinois anymore.
That's my understanding, but I would have to research it to make sure. But my understanding is vouchers are good anywhere in the US and Puerto Rico.
They are, yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, thank you.
Thank you. I'm Dr. Teresa Rouse, Superintendent of Joliet Public Schools, District 86. This conversation hits near and dear to my heart as we speak about these families and the children that are involved and the impacts upon those children. We already have a situation with the Fairview housing situation where I've got 281 students who I don't know where they're going to live after the demolition begins. We already know there's not housing for them to go to. There's a huge waiting list already at Riverwalk and within the HUD environment. Portability is great, but it costs a lot of money to move somewhere else. And having just moved a couple of years ago from California here is not a cheap venture. And I don't know that that mobility assistance isn't going to cover $10,000 a family to go to another state. It's a huge piece to consider. My heart is with what's going to happen with these children. And it's not just these children, they're my children. 281 of my babies are already being displaced in Fairview. Looking at eliminating anywhere from 37 units to a couple hundred units here. Several more of our children, my children, I own them. They're not those children. They're not those families. They're ours. Where will they go? Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think we've done our homework. Mike Gray, I live on Buell Street between these two guys. What's the statistics? They just tore that whole housing project down here. What is it, River West or River East, whatever it is. HUD had to displace those people. It's my understanding those townhouses have all been assigned to you. Is that true? I mean, where's the statistics on that?
I'll get to the answer because there's a housing authority representative here, but it's apples and oranges, and I think you need to understand that this, again, without getting too deep into it, in this situation, Joliet was working with the federal government when they began litigation. The federal government flipped on Joliet, and the Department of Justice, under President Barack Obama, with Eric Holder, sued the city of Joliet, and that was a game changer, in my opinion, on this project. So we have conditions placed on us that the Joliet Housing Authority did not have to deal with. And those conditions, again, in my opinion, have completely tied our hands. What was promised to the people of Joliet years ago is not feasible anymore. And again, that's my opinion, but I think the numbers speak for themselves. Bob, can you answer his question about the Housing Authority on Water Street?
We have 38 residents who lived on Water Street that are living at that location
They
now.
all moved back in?
They moved back in.
Where'd they go to? Where did you put them while you tore that Water Street project down and before you built and constructed?
Some of them moved in with families, some of them rented properties.
Okay.
So what we're doing now is we're looking for rental properties, and all over, like I said, we're looking far west side, Kappa, everywhere. There's a rental property. We're looking for the ones that are now living at Fairview.
You might want to take an inventory of those people and give them their option.
Not those people, they're good people.
I didn't say, I'm not saying they're good people, but ask them, if we do this, do 2 or 3 options in the survey of what they're gonna do and what's gonna happen if we follow through on any one of these scenarios.
Well, we could ask, there's managers here that work on site. If, again, you have 1,000 people you're dealing with, but is there any type of consensus on what they want to see happen? Could someone speak to that?
The consensus is they'd like to stay there, conditioned on the site being improved. And what that means is the things in their apartment that are broken, fix them. The issues with security, fix it. The issues with how the site looks, fix it. When we had 2 meetings with the residents themselves, they spent most of the time complaining about the conditions in their apartment. They weren't really overly concerned about the relocation because I really don't think they were focusing on it.
Hello, my name is Damon Stunage. I live on Center Street near West Side. I was a former director of finance for the Housing Authority of Joliet. I do know a little bit about public housing. I've been to, I think this is the fourth time I've heard Holston's presentation, and I've listened to all 5 of their plans, and none make any sense for the future of Joliet's near west side and downtown redevelopment. Holston's plans are all extremely expensive and ties the city's hands for any future development for the next 20 to 30 years. Holston's plans will ensure that property values continue to stagnate on the near west side and the city center. Holston's plans will ensure that no future infill development occurs on the near west side. Holston's plans cement the city's involvement in public housing for the next 20 to 30 years. The mayor has said he does not want the city in the public housing business, from what I understand.
Correct.
The mayor has said he really doesn't like any of their plans, from what I understand.
Correct.
I came up with an alternative plan. This plan would return over 80% of the purchase price to the city over the next 4 years. This plan wouldn't tie the city's hands as to future redevelopment efforts along the river. This plan will give future developers on the near west side and in the city center the assurance that the area has stabilized. With a stabilized neighborhood and future redevelopment, the city would gain its remaining investment back through increased property taxes. I would be happy to share the details of the plan with city staff or the Land Use and Legislative Committee, the full city council, or any other city body. Thank you.
Thank you. Could you share that plan with Mr. Hales after the meeting?
Yes, I will.
Thank you.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, let's go for it.
All right, Damon?
Do it now. Sorry.
Do you want to give us the overview right now?
Really? Teased us with that.
Well, I will agree with Holston on one major point. Evergreen Terrace is a cash cow. It generates roughly $5 million a year. Based on the current rents, current expenses, without all the different reserve funds, I wanted to keep it real simple. As it stands right now, it would return close to $2.8 million a year to the city right now, if the city owns it, if the city isn't paying property taxes on it.
Is that gross or net?
No, it's net.
2.8 million?
Yep. This plan keeps the original 115, or I should say the HUD plan, the 115 units, over a period of time. It also allows for a transition of the remaining 240 units, which gives the residents an opportunity to move out or decide whether they want to be moved out. As we've already heard, there's a 25% turnover a year. There's a natural moving out of the system, so to say. So essentially, it's providing 241 vouchers per the original HUD plan, transitioned over a period of 3 to 4 years. In a 4-year period, that's roughly $7.5 million to the city. Where we view the opportunity for the city is the long-term revival of the near west side and future development that would occur along the river. So that's.
Ken Mahalich, I know you jumped into the books of Evergreen. Do you have any comment on that?
Mayor, I will say that our auditing firm, Owen Rogers, just did a recent audit. Now, that was only the first 3 months of the last 3 months of last year. There was about $250,000 for that. If you were to annualize that, that'd be about $1 million worth of net income. We've been looking at the first 6 months of this year. It's trending a little bit slower than that. It's probably in that 800,000 annual range. So I'd be glad to, if you'd like for us to look at what has been proposed, but those numbers don't seem to be with what we've experienced.
Thank you. Yes.
Can Holston comment on that?
Yeah.
Yes, we looked at the prior income and expense statements from the owner at the time, and then we used that to do a budget. We budgeted about $1 million a year before debt service, after debt service, that would drop down to about $200,000 a year. If anything, expenses are going to rise over the next couple of years as we continue to pour money into the property and take care of all these issues in the tenant apartments. So I appreciate $5 million a year. I just don't know where it's going to come from. As far as property taxes, that's a common argument against affordable housing. Affordable housing brings down my value, and I'd like to see the proof. I mean.
Any other comments? Turn it over to council. Any questions or comments?
Question. Andrea, you made a statement about, I think it was HUD is holding 2.6 million?
Yes.
Of whose money? Our money? How did it get there? Where did it come from? How did
Yeah.
we get it back?
So there was a replacement reserve that HUD typically has a replacement reserve. It's required for typically all public housing projects. I believe the 2.6 million was in place at the time that the city acquired the property. I do know, and Peter, you would know the exact amounts, but I do know that we give money to that replacement reserve every year as well. So as part of our operating budget, there's a certain amount that's allocated annually to the replacement reserve to keep it either steady or to increase the amount. And Peter would have to speak to that on from an operations perspective.
We were very fortunate in this case because it was eminent domain that the replacement reserve came with the property. Normally that's the property of the seller. But in this case, it was a take, and so we were able to start off with about 2.6 million. We contribute about 100,000 a year to that reserve. Most lenders and certainly government entities will require you to have a replacement reserve for capital needs that are unexpected over the years. And so we have a good amount of money for that size property. I'm very comfortable with it.
So capital repair needs that you touched on a few different times cannot come out of that reserve?
No, that's where they can come from.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't want to punish the rental income, so that's why those reserves are there.
And it would be replenished.
And it gets replenished every year, yeah.
One more?
Sure.
I don't know that you do have or don't have a copy of a letter that Marty sent out to us confirming how this date of September 30th came. Marty, what I don't understand here is that if we decide to go with scenario 1 or 2 where we have the complete 319 units, have we then signed on a HUD contract that we're going to have these units for a 10 or 20 year period?
No.
Sure, anybody? Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure. So the way the settlement agreement reads is that the city has the opportunity, there was a 1-year HAP contract in place. The city has the opportunity to have an additional 1-year contract, which is what we'd be going after when someone had asked about the time frame. September 27th is the 1 year from the date of acquisition. August 20th is simply us getting our paperwork into HUD to be able to have that 1-year HAP contract. The 2 years, Marty, the September 30th, 2 years, you have to.
That was a 1-year extension.
It was a 1-year extension. However, if we do another 1-year extension, that then, after this 1 year that's coming up, then we would be in a 20-year renewal period. So it would then be a 20-year commitment to HUD to keep those units in place. If it's 356, if it's 319, however many units is, it's a 20-year commitment at that point.
I missed a little bit. If we ask for a 1-year extension?
1-year extension now does not mean that you have to keep a certain number of units. I mean, there's 115 units that have to be kept somewhere, but it doesn't mean that those 356 or 319 units have to be kept on site. However, in a year from this coming September, if there's another HAP contract renewal, that will then put us within a 20-year time frame. It can be a 1-year HAP, but it says it's either a 1-year HAP, but it's going to be a minimum of 20 years. So we can do 1-year extensions, but it is a 20-year time frame at that point.
Okay, anything we do today is for October 1st of 2019.
Whatever we do today would be for, yes, September 27th or October 1st of 2019, correct. Correct.
Thank you.
Ken, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think Peter clarified it, but when we purchased the property, there was 2.7 million, 2.6 million roughly that came with it. That money is actually sitting in the LLC. So I think that was the misunderstanding. That did come over, and as Peter mentioned, they are adding to it. I believe it's about $500 annually per unit as well.
Yeah, I was mistaken. I wasn't aware that it was in the LLC. Normally it's held by a lender, but in the case that the city is the lender, I believe that's why it's in the LLC.
Yeah, the other thing to add to that, Mayor, is that my understanding is, and I'm sure Andrea can confirm this, is that, so I know they sent over a listing, she mentioned earlier, of about $1 million of items that are capital. That's where that money would come from. It'd be that 2.6, 2.7 roughly that's sitting there. But we're not allowed to spend it on other things other than capital, and we need to get HUD approval in order to spend it, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's the same thing that I was just gonna say. I'm sorry, I did not realize that the 2.6 or 2.7 million was sitting with the LLC. However, regardless of where the funds are sitting, prior to us being able to use those funds, we have to get HUD approval. So even if it's sitting in our account, it doesn't mean we can just go spend it. It means we have to get HUD authority to draw down on any of those funds.
Yes.
Thank you. Damon had mentioned something to the effect that $500,000 of property taxes was being paid. Are we, City of Joliet, assessed property taxes going forward?
The LLC has been assessed property taxes, and it is approximately, I think it might be closer to $600,000 annually. And so what the LLC is doing is accruing for that on a monthly basis and setting that aside.
Because it's a separate corporation, it has to pay taxes.
Yeah, because if it was just a city, we wouldn't pay it, but I think when they looked at it with legal counsel, that because we're in with a for-profit entity, the LLC becomes essentially for-profit in a sense, and then has to pay those taxes.
Thank you.
I think for full disclosure, though, I should point out, because I was part of the conversation with our Boston attorneys, we don't have solid legal opinion that LLC is a separate entity from the city of Joliet. That's kind of a hope right now. And I know it had been posited before by prior corporation councils that that's the case, but there's well, Marty, you could probably chime in. We're not sure that that's accurate.
It's complicated.
Mayor?
Yes.
Just to be clear, because I think it's causing some confusion for people on all sides of this issue, sometimes a comparison is being made to some of the projects Mr. Holstein's company has done in Chicago, to, certain HODGE, Housing Authority of Joliet projects. The difference is they didn't have acquisition costs. They didn't have $9.5 million in legal costs on top of the actual sale price because they were owned by a housing authority. Many of the questions that are going unanswered here and we're trying to figure out, this is what happens when a city tries to be a housing authority. So let's be clear about that. That's why there's certain things that people have brought up that, well, how come the Joliet Housing Authority did this with one project? Because they're a housing authority. We aren't. I don't think there's another city in the country, because we asked Mr. Holstein and other people to look into it. There's no other city that's ever done this, has there? City, not housing authority. There is no gauge, there is no map, there is no compass in what we're doing. So yeah, it all goes back to the original argument. There was no plan, and there still isn't a plan. That's what this is supposed to be, one of these plans. Now, the question I had is we have 2.6 million roughly in a capital reserve, of which you've identified just south of $1 million, about 980,000, I think. That's critical repairs that we need, or improvements need to be made, which would then drop that fund to 1.6 million, and then we would replenish it according to your estimates by 100,000 a year. Okay. Now, how old are the roofs? And that means each individual roof. How old are the HVAC systems, the compressors, the air handlers on top? And how much asbestos will be uncovered as we do remods to total tear-outs?
I think the roofs are probably easily 20 years old. I think the HVAC systems are probably 15 to 20 years old. Well, there has been some selective replacement over the years. As far as asbestos, there's probably asbestos in the floor tile. I haven't seen asbestos on pipes, but we haven't broken open walls yet, so I'm not sure.
So, Mr. Holstein, so it's safe to say that a 20-year-old HVAC system, and I know there's been other, and it's safe to say that a 20-year-old roof, they're getting towards the end of their life. What's the estimate to complete? I know in the proposal that was emailed to us, for the critical repairs, there were several roofs that were repaired.
Yes.
Flashing, I believe, was the predominant thing, leaking flashing. What's gonna be the cost in the next 5 or 10 years, or sooner, to completely replace all the roofs of all the remaining buildings?
We haven't done that calculation, but it's probably $500,000.
Our operations team has walked every single unit in all of the buildings. I know they've gone on the roofs as well. We could ask them for dates for the roofs and for the mechanical systems. We typically do a physical needs assessment. I don't know how far into that physical needs assessment our operations team is at this point. I do know that the capital repairs that they outlined for you all were critical items that needed to be completed. But at all of our properties, we do a thorough physical needs assessment, sometimes done by a third party, and it might be in this instance, so we can get those answers to you.
Thank you. This is for me.
Questions, comments?
I have a little comment. I just wanted to bring up, I understand it is expensive to move out of state. And I don't know what the, Dr. Rouse's expenses were when she moved here. I don't know what kind of home she moved from and how much furniture she had to move here. But regardless, I just wanted to make sure that if some of these residents had families in other states and wanted to live near them, that option was available to them. So that's all I have to say.
Okay.
We have set aside money in all these scenarios for relocation assistance.
I just wanted to remind everyone here that when people choose to move out of state with their vouchers, if they are able to port out, that the only thing that they port out with is the housing voucher. If they have things that like food stamps or things like that, those do not go with them. They have to apply for those at whatever state or city they go to, so they could end up being short wherever they go to. So they will have to reapply, and if the state that they go to does not have money, they could choose to go to, say, Wisconsin, but if Wisconsin is not having extra funds, they may want to go to Wisconsin and able to take that voucher to Wisconsin, but if Wisconsin says we're already allotted as much as we have, so we can't honor your voucher to come, then they can't go there. They'd have to choose another state to go to, even though their voucher is good.
And again, they don't have to.
They don't
It's
have
just
to.
an option available, and I just want folks to know that this option was available to the residents that live there if they choose not to live here anymore.
That's
Period.
correct. It's available, but
It's available, but they don't have to take it.
Correct.
That's what I just wanted to get that clarified.
Yes.
Thank you.
John?
Yes, I just have a question here for Holston regarding your spreadsheet where it says total project costs and then your funding gap. So if I'm reading this correctly, I'm looking at scenario 3, scenario 4, and I guess scenario 5 as well. You've got a total project cost of $34.8 million. You've got a funding gap of $2.8 million. So I'm assuming that $32 million is going to be some sort of debt, and then you said the $2.8 million you could probably raise as that like private equity or something like that.
So, and I don't have it was shown on the previous version of our PowerPoint presentation, but we always go after multiple sources of financing. So there's always hard debt, which is paid for through the rents. Essentially, it's sized based off the rents. And then we have soft funds from Illinois Housing Development Authority, City of Chicago, not in this case, but there's soft debt as well. That $2.7 million, we believe we can get additional dollars on at least that scenario from the Illinois Housing Development Authority. They have either trust fund dollars or home funds available. We've sized that, my recollection is we've sized that on both subphases at about 1.5 million. We believe we could get that up to about 2 million on each phase. That's pretty much the threshold for IDA, so that picks up $1 million. Other ways that we could fill the additional 1.7 or 1.8 million dollars would be scaling back with our contractor, going through VE options. I mean, there's numerous ways, but I'm just saying that $2.8 million is not insurmountable. We can find a way to fill that gap. However, when we get to scenarios 4 and 5 and we're talking about $10 million, it becomes more and more difficult to fill a financing gap of that size.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor. Andrea, if I could just ask you, while we're on the subject of the funding gaps.
Sure.
With IDA funds, we're talking, is there a time period or is there a limit that one can go and ask for these funds, or do you have to wait for so long, or maybe turn something over?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. So the way that IDA typically operates, they change from year to year, but they have something that's called a PPA, which is a preliminary project assessment that we would submit to them on a project of this type. And then they either give us a green light or they tell us we have to reapply. If we receive the green light, then we go after tax credits through the Illinois Housing Development Authority. And so the city of Chicago also has tax credits. Unfortunately, not unfortunately, but we're in the city of Joliet, so we don't have the opportunity to tap into that. So it would be solely IDA. Typically, there's about, once you submit a PPA, they typically push back on the initial PPA, or if they do let you go forward, you don't typically get financing on the first go around. They almost get you into a pipeline. So we typically, on our deals, think that from submission of a PPA, it's about a 3-year wait before they will actually finance the project, assuming that it's a competitive project. Yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes.
Just a question back on the plan that has to be submitted.
Yeah.
I think it's a September 30th deadline. We have to adopt some kind of plan to be submitted to HUD. And I think it was mentioned in a prior presentation that can be adjusted, the plan can be adjusted, or is it in concrete?
Right, so the September 30th is really this HAP contract, this 1-year HAP renewal. I mean, we're gonna have, in order to pay the city back, we wanna keep those rents. So we want that HAP contract. With the plan that we need to submit to them now is, A, are we gonna be renewing this HAP contract? And I believe that the answer to that is yes, because otherwise, where are the rents coming from to pay the city back? But as part of that in the settlement agreement has 2 things in it that are of concern to us. And first is the community center, which is at 360. It states throughout this that it's going to be at 363 North Broadway. I'm not an attorney, but it's my belief that you would have to reapproach Judge Norgal if we're going to keep the community center in place. And that may be something that takes longer, more time. So I would think that when we go to HUD now to get that HAP renewal, that we're going to mention to them, if the city council is okay with it, that we would be keeping the community center as is, where it is. The other thing is if we're gonna be demolishing those 2 buildings F and G, so 37 units, we're gonna either have to include that in our HAP renewal now, or we're gonna have to ask or tell HUD that we're gonna be contemplating demolition of those within the next year, assuming that it's gonna take place then. Then there's another 1-year period by which we need to decide, are we gonna do a HAP renewal again, which would then have, for the existing units that we're keeping, which would then have us stay kind of with the current unit configuration, or are we gonna submit a full redevelopment plan that has one of these scenarios or something else?
Okay.
But from a year from this September, if we do renew the HAP contract again, the way my interpretation of the settlement agreement is that then we are in for 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mayor? Yes. I had a couple of questions.
Sure.
Out of curiosity, realistically, and I know you've not looked into it, but how much would it sell for on the market in your estimation if it was put up for sale? The entire complex, right now?
With the existing,
Everything the way it is?
I mean, there's a
The NOI is about $1 million, and if you capitalize that at, I don't know, 6-7%, what is that?
I would say the appraised value.
About maybe 13-14 million,
Similar to what?
similar to what you paid.
Yeah.
And the other question I had for you folks, you brought it up in your comments, Mr. Holston, under community input.
Yes.
There was one item that said that apparently some folks, and I've heard people question this directly or go around it, about a conflict of interest between managing and developing and making money. So to be completely clear to our residents, can you please explain exactly all the ways? There's been some confusion.
Sure.
People have said, oh, Holstein's completely nonprofit, and that's not true. You have a nonprofit arm.
Right.
So how much do you make, for management?
Sure.
How much will you make from the development? How will that happen?
Okay, no problem. For management, we get 6% of the money that we collect every month. So if the gross income is $3 million a year, and if we happen to collect it all, 6% of that is $180,000 a year. I don't think that that's what we're getting, but that's just the numbers. As co-developer with the city, we're entitled to 50% of the developer fee. Typically, the developer fee is capped by the State Housing Authority. We've seen up to $2 million as a developer fee on very large projects. Projects of this size will probably be more in the $1.5 million range. We would get $750,000 if it was $1.5 million. That is paid out based on benchmarks. The first benchmark is financial closing. The next benchmark would be construction completion. The next benchmark would be property stabilization, where it's filled up. And the final benchmark would be after about 3 years after that, where it's operating with stability. That type of deal would have a limited partner because it would be a tax credit deal. The general partner would have to indemnify the limited partner from any environmental issues. The general partner would have to guarantee cash flow in terms of if there are any cash losses, the general partner would have to come up with a difference. So there's long-term liability on this. It would be a limited partnership for a period of 15 years, and that's usually how long the liability goes out.
And who would be the general partner?
The LLC would be the general partner.
Now, what would happen to Holston as a 50% partner, albeit not a controlling partner, if the city, if something came up where there was a loss, okay, and this shell that we call an LLC that's untested, personally myself, and this is worth about a cup of coffee because I'm not an attorney, is I don't see it happening. And if it does, I think we all need to look in putting our fire and police department, all the equipment into an LLC to protect us from suits.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense. But we'll see. I guess, Marty, it's complicated, correct?
Yes, the mayor was correct, and you were actually correct that this has never happened before.
Right. So it's not been tested yet. So should it fail that test, is Holston in for the same half of the loss, or is the city at that point as the controlling partner going to say it's a $3 million loss?
No, Holston's in for half of the loss. The other thing we do to help mitigate risk is the limited partner would require an initial replacement reserve. They would require an initial operating reserve. So there are reserves set up in the beginning in the event that there's cash flow issues.
I'm done, Mayor.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Officer
Go ahead, Terry.
Actually, I have 2 or 3 questions. You thinking about buying it, Larry? You asked.
We'll have a vote on that.
That's with you. I got $10. Listen, the center.
Yes, the community center.
Was it the judge or HUD said it had to be moved, and why?
So I don't know all the history on that. I mean, thinking through this, my thought is that 363 North Broadway is on the other side of the fenced-in area where Evergreen Terrace is. So perhaps it just seemed like a logical fit to have it there. I'm not sure all of the background. Marty might know more than me on that. But it doesn't seem, given the community center that's in place, it doesn't seem like a logical thing to move it, given the expense that it would cost.
Okay. Have the residents weighed in on that? Like, is it okay where it's at for them, or they like it, or other amenities for a community center, or that hasn't been asked?
He can talk.
Jackie?
I was just kind of
Jackie
wondering.
can talk to the
residents talk about the community center. Liz?
Hi, Liz Prodich. I'm a program manager for Holston Human Capital Development at Riverwalk Homes. In regards to the community center, I don't believe the residents probably ever realized it could be moved to 363, but I think they're very much used to where the community center is right now. And it's where the management company is there, our offices are there, our community room is there, all our after-school programs, adult programming, everything that has been going on has been gone on there. So I pretty much think it's a comfortability level there that they know it's there. So, the new uses. Things have been moving very quickly. Okay, we've already had an outpouring from Joliet as far as our after-school program. Everyone has come in. They donate their services. We have an after-school program We have a one-on-one tutoring program for youth. We have a women's empowerment group. We have, currently, we have 2 daycare centers that are wanting to be on site, so we're hoping to have a daycare center on site, along with the food pantry that's gonna be funded by Will County Center for Community Concerns. Kankakee, yes, and Joliet Junior College, we met with them the other day, and we are going to have an on-site GED class. They're also gonna provide a career counselor. They're going to provide on-site tutoring. They're going to provide a bridge program, and we have to pick in one of the areas, either CNA, computer training, or logistics and shipment. And this is open. Everything that we do at at Riverwalk Homes is open to the public. And I have discussed things with the St. John's neighborhood to get the word out, because anything that's not just to benefit Riverwalk, it's to benefit the community there. And that's why we're so excited about this partnership with Joliet Junior College, because as you know, their campus is on the west side of Joliet, so a lot of people don't have the transportation. So now with us having daycare center on site, which is another perk for people who are struggling, that their children, they can feel safe that their children are there on site while they attend classes, and this benefits, like I said, the entire area. They don't have to travel to the far west, because the city center campus, to my knowledge, holds some GED classes, but culinary arts and maybe some business classes, but not a lot of the training classes like CNA or logistics that a lot of individuals that reside at Riverwalk go into.
Thank you.
Any questions?
I just want to ask them about this.
Right. Well, yeah. Like I said before, it's the community center is not just for Riverwalk. It is for the entire community. So. Per the settlement agreement, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, and I do want to, if I can mention now, Dr. Rouse, I want to thank, where'd she go? Oh, I want to thank your staff. The schools are very much involved. We had District 86, Farragut. We had your new principal and assistant principal, wonderful, over registering. Today, the truancy specialist, Larry Crawford, was there. We are focusing on education, as Peter said. Education is one of our top priorities, not just for youth, but for adults, and truancy also. And that touches on, I know we talk about separating families. I did truancy in that area before. Okay, when you start separating families, you start separating their support systems. You start to break down the family. And I know Betty can attest to this too. When we start taking people away from their support system, okay, we're interrupting kids' schools, we're interrupting families, we're interrupting their education. And so an already vulnerable population, okay, is already having another strike against them when we start moving them around. Because when they move from place to place to place, okay, they start falling behind in school. When they start falling behind in school, it starts to affect generation after generation. And this is the type of generational thing we're trying to stop. So we're very happy with District 86, with Joliet Junior College, and all the other people that are coming in with the programs.
Thank you. Yeah, one other thing. If could it be used in like a grocery store or something?
We haven't, I think our thought was that if it would be demolished, it would just become vacant land. We could look at retail. I just think retail is going to be awfully difficult. Typically, retailers like to be on a main thoroughfare.
But I mean, that's Cass Street, isn't it? No?
What's that? It's on, the south end.
Well,
south end of the site, yeah.
I mean, look, man, that's a pretty busy street when the bridge is up. I mean,
when the bridge is working.
We can definitely explore it. There's no question.
Because that's Cass Street, isn't it?
It's a bit, Western, I think it's busy. It's a busy street.
Western and
then it comes up, it goes over the river, comes up the hill.
Bottom of the bridge.
Broadway.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, it's at the bottom. It's at the bottom on the west side.
Okay.
It's just north of Western, yes, along the river.
I was just wondering, so you basically were just thinking leaving it green, green space?
It could be green space, or we could even build on it in the future.
Okay, that's all I know.
Just following up on a couple of Larry's questions. So I understand that, I don't know if it's for you or for Marty, that we, the city / the LLC, has a contract with you to manage at 6%.
That's correct.
Correct? But take me to the redevelopment then. So does the city, LLC, and yourself have a contract already to do the redevelopment, or could this be bid out to the public sector?
There is a development agreement, but I think it contemplated us being a consultant. But now that we're half owner, I don't really know how that goes. We were brought to the city because we're experts in what we do. And we think we do it better than most. We've been doing it 43 years. And we've had just about every situation you can imagine in Chicago, so we bring that expertise down there. I think we're a natural pick to help on the development. Again, affordable housing is not a piece of cake. Your fees are limited. There's a lot of exposure, a lot of liability, a lot of guarantees that you have to do. And that's what we do. We're good at it, and we hope we can do it.
Thank you.
Anything else? David?
Going back to one of the objectives tonight was to hopefully have each of the council members, if you're ready, and is to begin to give some direction. Is there one of these scenarios that you individually would prefer? And then, of course, ultimately, we're looking, where is the majority? Does the majority maybe support one scenario over all the others? Keep in mind, it is critical that we start working on the submittal.
We're working on the HAB renewal now because some of the items, we have not submitted anything to HUD until we get the council to sign off on it, but some of the items are longer term lead items, so we've started working on that internally. But obviously, in order to submit by August 20th, we would need the council to say yes, in fact, that they want us to proceed with the HAB renewal for the 1-year HAB renewal.
Okay. And is there anything else you would like to ask of the council tonight, based on that?
No, I mean, I think the main issues for us is A, the HAP renewal happening, B, the community center, and I don't know if that's a conversation as well with, what's the gentleman's name from Henry Cormans, as well, to see if we have to reapproach Judge Norgal. My reading of this, I believe that we would have to move the community center. And then whether or not council wants us to proceed with the demolition of those two buildings, given the site visits that they had. If that's something that they're wanting us to do, then I think that now is the appropriate time to talk to HUD about it. Even if it's not gonna happen immediately, we'd have to go back to, the HAP contract would have to be modified, is my belief. It would be nice to approach now.
Locked in, right?
And the last thing too is, granted, I think ultimately, whatever the council decides, we could work with Marty and have something drafted so there's absolute clarity. What is the majority direction? How do they want us to proceed? So, we know that majority position now. If we brought that back in 2 weeks, any other thoughts on?
Well, yeah, we can definitely come back. I mean, we should talk more about if we can renew the HAB for 1 year, figure out the community center and the two buildings. I think a greater redevelopment plan could go in next year, right?
It would have to, we couldn't wait until
No, we're not gonna-
It would
not-
have to be
right.
within the first couple of months in order to get HUD's feedback and determine
Right.
how we're gonna proceed with the HAB contract.
Right, but it just, for sure, we have to be with a solid project before we go into a 20-year period, because we have to tell them how many years are gonna be under the 20-year HAB.
Correct, but part of the settlement agreement, the 363 North Broadway, for the community center, the city has committed to having a new community center in place within a 2-year period. So that's part of my concern now, is that even to demolish something and build new, it's gonna take a year for that to happen. I mean, to draw plans, et cetera.
We don't recommend the city do that. We recommend the city allow us to keep the one that we have and enhance it.
Right.
But then we'd have to make that change with the documents.
Well, I think the easy question, I think, is do we renew the HAP contracts for another
Exactly,
year?
yeah, for the 3
Is
days,
there any-
that's, you have
Does
to.
anyone disagree with that?
I don't know. So you're saying we'd like to renew the 319 units with HAP?
We'd like to renew the 356 now because
56,
there's,
I'm
yeah,
sorry.
the
Yeah.
existing, and then if the city does in fact want us to approach HUD about demolishing those two buildings, we can do that at the time that we submit our HAP renewal and ask them, would that be possible to have a modification of the HAP contract in the 1-year period that we have the HAP, assuming we get approval?
So we don't have to do that now.
I'd like to approach them about it now.
Just,
It doesn't, it's not.
I'm sorry, I'm not following you. What do we have to have for the 20th?
If we're gonna keep the 356 units, which is what I think I'm hearing council, that we wanna keep that, we have to.
1 more year.
For 1 more year. But if there's a thought within that 1-year period, that we're gonna potentially demolish these, we might wanna talk to HUD about that now.
John?
I mean, I think, just to kind of pick up on what Councilman Mudron said, I think you definitely want to go forward with the HAP contracts, otherwise
Yes.
you're going
Right,
to lose
otherwise we
that
have
revenue
no-
stream, correct?
Right.
And within a year, I mean, that gives you a year,
Right.
you can make then modifications if you choose to do so,
That's
correct? So
They
I
just
think-
don't want to pay for units we don't have. That's all.
Right. So does that make sense?
Yes.
Andrea?
It does. I know that there was concern previously from council members about those two buildings. And so if there's not, if we think that we can operate them as is, I think Peter, you for another year, that's fine.
Oh, well, what if within that year's time, you said you could go back to the judge and say, hey.
Not to the judge, to HUD,
to HUD,
yes.
okay.
But I think that if we're gonna do that, because we're gonna be having conversations with them now about this HAP renewal,
Right.
if we're thinking that it's potential, that we could potentially demolish those two buildings, we might wanna approach them about that now.
Right.
And say, we wanna renew for the 356 units now, but during that 1-year
However,
timeframe,
I-
however, during that 1-year timeframe, we might come back to you to seek an amendment to demolish 2 of those buildings.
I mean, my personal view would be yes.
Yeah.
But
Mike?
question, that, for 2 buildings though, but you could go back to them and say, we want to do more than that, correct?
Yes.
I mean,
yeah,
the one
absolutely.
shows 115.
Yeah, we
So you
could
take it
go
down.
back, early next year, and say, okay, we finally come up with our final plan.
Okay. And then by renewing the HAP this time, it doesn't tie us in for 20 years.
That's correct. No, we get tied in, for 20 years, a year from
The
now.
second year.
You know, we probably should address this, because David, I think this is one of your goals too tonight. Are you considering going $60 million in debt on this? Is that viable?
I don't know what I'm thinking about yet.
Well, we have to decide.
Well, I don't want another 20 years of Evergreen Terrace.
No, but we can't afford the 60, scenario 5, in my opinion, is impossible.
I'm
So
not
we
looking
should,
at it.
if you want to go that way, say so. If not, let's get realistic. Let's not keep blowing smoke at people.
I'm not prepared to say which
All right,
plan
well,
I'm
you're gonna have to
tonight.
get prepared soon. We gotta start
Well,
making
2
these
weeks.
decisions.
Right,
2 weeks.
yeah.
Okay.
In the meantime, you're saying you want to go ahead and renew the HAP,
Yes, the 300.
and then you can adjust them from 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, any of those scenarios.
Yes, or 5A or 3B.
Okay. Okay.
Anyone else, Pat?
So can you take me back to October 2019, or ahead to that? And regardless, we're going to need to make potentially need to make another decision
Yes.
at that time.
Yes.
Would that be a year later then? Because when we tell them in October what we want to do, it's really then October of 2020 that we could actually do it? Are we locked in for say we go with stay with the 356 that we have today?
So there's a 1-year renewal that we're going after now.
Yep.
So that takes us, let's say, to October 1st of 2019.
Yep.
October 1st of 2019, if we seek a renewal, that's a 20-year commitment.
Right, if we don't seek a renewal, how early do we have to tell HUD we're not renewing 100 units or, pick whatever number you want there?
Probably a couple months, at least a couple months prior to that.
Not a year.
Well, there's relocation that's gonna have to take place
Got
as
it.
well.
We
And
would
so we
be-
have to go through
Would have to find
how
that.
relocation would be handled, but yes.
But we're not locked, okay.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just want to be clear on something.
Yeah, I want to be clear. I thought we needed to let HUD know by the first of next year what we're gonna do for the 20 years.
No, we're finishing up the 1 year half.
Now, right.
$16 million. Second 1 year half. Money's gone already. By the end of the second year half, HUD's got to know what we're going to do. And we got to know what we're going to do because we're going to ask HUD for so many subsidy units. That's going to happen.
And we don't have to let them know that till next October.
Yeah, well, before.
Well, but prior to that, keep in mind that the city has committed to having a new community center. So it's gonna be, I mean, decisions are gonna have to be made sooner rather than later. So part of my thought is if with the HAP renewal of the 356 units, at that time, if the city is thinking that it's also gonna keep the community center in place, I think that's now the time to reapproach that. And Marty, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I do think that it's gonna take, I mean, if settlement agreement is very clear that it's gonna be at 363 Broadway, and it doesn't seem like that is that's not where we want it. It doesn't seem financially like that's the route to go.
And we don't have a cost estimate on what it would take to build that new community
Well,
center.
plans would have to, I mean, we could do a preliminary estimate, but plans would have to be drawn up. Yeah, and then there's demolition as well that would have to be done of the existing community center. So that's a cost incurred as well.
Take down 363.
Correct, and take down 363 Broadway, the existing, and relocate all of those people as well.
It's a very, very costly alternative.
Very, very exceptionally
We
costly.
have a good community center right now.
Mayor, there were a couple of,
Yeah, the public
Residents.
that's closed, we can address the council later in the meeting.
Okay.
We have to move forward.
okay.
So, I'm looking for feedback from the council. Mike?
What?
Well, we have to give some direction tonight what we want to do.
I thought we had 2 weeks.
Not the way of 2 weeks.
I thought you want to pursue the HAP contracts immediately.
Right, so we have to have the paperwork in to HUD by August 20th in order to get our HAP renewal. They need a month. They've set a deadline for us of August 20th. We've already started working on some of the paperwork for those 356 units, but we would need that decision pretty much tonight in terms of moving forward with the 356
This is for the 1 year.
for the 1 year.
1 year.
I don't think we have a choice.
I don't need,
And then decide how many units we want to keep
Correct.
and where they're going to be.
yes.
I think to simplify this with the HAP contracts is, whether you go with my suggestion of selling it for market value, right on up to the most expensive one that could bankrupt the city, it's all more marketable if it has the HAP contracts,
Yes.
whether you're gonna sell it. So, I mean, yeah, we have to give them permission, I think, to approve the HAP contracts for that 1 year. And then I hope that all of us in the council don't look at that 1 year as another chance to kick it further down the road. These decisions should be made pretty shortly, within a couple of months after August for long term. I don't want to be sitting here, or I don't want anybody to be sitting here next August saying, oh, we got to make a decision before next month.
Can we say one thing about, you brought up selling it for market value. The settlement agreement does read that the land, regardless of what's done, is going to be used for a public purpose. And it outlines that they're up with housing, their amount of affordable housing that's there. Not necessarily the 115 units, but my reading of this is that it would be 40% of units at 60% of AMI or less, or 20% of units at 50% of AMI or less. So there's always going to be an affordability component if there's new residential units that are there. So I just want to point that out because that potentially, if you're thinking it's going to be sold off at market value, that's going to have to be taken into consideration by the potential buyer.
They have to run it the same way we're running it. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Mayor?
Yes.
I would like to, yes, we have to renew it, but I would like to see the proposal that was made earlier by the other gentleman, and he was gonna get together with Ken to see if that was actual feasibility to do it that way, and I'd like to see that proposal.
Absolutely.
Move forward
So we
with
have a
the HAP
consensus
contracts,
to apply for the HAP contracts tonight?
yeah. Did you need something for that community center? I mean, it seems like it's cost prohibitive to rebuild a new community center. I mean, we might as well use the existing one. Did you need that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we should approach HUD about that now as well and let them know. HUD is looking, just so you know, HUD is looking for us to give them an indication of what we're doing. We've had discussions with Dan Burke, who's the head of the Midwest. he is looking for an indication from us as to what we're going to be looking to do here. Even though a final plan doesn't have to be in place until next year, they are looking for us to provide them with some feedback. And I do think now is the time, given it's a year out from now, if the community center is going to stay in place, I think we have to mention that to HUD. And I also think the city then, Marty, potentially has to go back with Judge Norgal to get authority to keep it where it is.
I think that's the route for us to go, I believe.
Keep the existing unit renovated or whatever you want to do.
Well, as it was stated, the residents are comfortable there, so.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful facility, they've done a lot to it, so it is, well within the working rights of there, so I agree. We need to talk about keeping that, our community center there, and then go ahead and getting the renewal done now, because we need the revenue on that. Yeah, that has to happen.
I think we're good. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We're all
Thank
good.
Next on the agenda is citizens to be heard on agenda items. Is there anyone present that would like to speak on an agenda item this evening? Seeing none, we'll pass it over to the city manager to discuss tomorrow night's agenda items.
Thank you very much. Mayor and City Council, as you see the pre-council meeting agenda for tonight, you notice tomorrow we'll have at least one council committee reports. In the section on consent agenda, we do have several items. Well, let me just go through the approval of the minutes from July 16, 17. There is, even though you have a position vacancy.
Can you close the doors, please? Thank you.
Okay. On the position vacancies, there is one change to the memo. You get the deputy police. This was the last of three positions mentioned in that, so I'll be including that as an amendment for tomorrow night to only approve position 1 and 2, and not the last one, the deputy police chief. We have some catch up on some regular payroll reports. You'll see 2 for April, 2 from May, 1 in June. On Council Memo 39918, authorization to approve the proposed renewal of the property and casualty coverage. This went before the Finance Committee, and they provided a positive recommendation for its approval. I do want to bring to the council's attention again that as a result to changes made in shifting from a commission base to a fee base, the city will be saving $50,000 a year in insurance costs because of this change, which came as a result of some input from a individual who's been working on us, reviewing not only our insurance coverage, but especially we're looking for a final report and presentation on workman's comp and some further recommendations how to address possible cost savings in the workman's comp program. Is there any questions on the property and casualty coverage renewal that is listed here? If not, moving on, Council Memo 400-18, 2019 Roadway Reconstruction Program. You have listed several projects that the Public Works Department is recommending for funding out of our motor fuel tax funding area for next summer. And in order to continue to move ahead and have a timely bidding of this project, we need to undertake a lot of additional work, research, analysis, to have these particular street projects ready for next year. Just a little postscript. One thing we may want to consider in the future is how do we get more community input on roadways that are being looked at, considered. There's no doubt there is more roadways that we probably could resurface if we had additional money, but based upon the limited funding available, this is the recommendation, this list for summer of 2019. Are there any questions you have on this? This will be going to the Public Service Committee tomorrow for review and a recommendation.
Quick question, if you don't mind, Mayor. No, just going backwards one to the insurance brokerage.
Yes.
When's the last time that we went out for requests for proposals from another broker?
I'm not certain on that. Historical, does Jim Gennady, Kathy Franson, do you know how long? I think we probably had Arthur J. Gallagher. Okay.
Thank you.
We'll provide that. Okay, then moving on, jumping over, there's nothing on licenses, permits, public hearings under ordinances. We do have an ordinance declaring certain properties public nuisance. I think the information provided was self-explanatory, as you've seen in the past. I don't think anything out of the ordinary. Any questions on that? Council Memo 40218. We do have a ordinance being recommended to clarify in adopting certain provisions for food trucks. The Land Use and Legislative Committee did provide a positive recommendation for approval of this ordinance in their prior meeting. Any questions? Next item, Council Memo 40318. This is a 2018 annual budget for the City of Joliet and requests authorization to purchase one case wheel loader in the amount of $209,900 to McCann. And if I could, let me kind of combine this with Council Memo 40418 for the purchase of 2 case skid steer loaders in the amount of $161,920 to Patent Industries CAT. Both of these items will be before the Public Service Committee, but what I'd like to mention is, unfortunately, we are seeing, especially in these 2 cases, an emergency need to replace the existing equipment. So we're replacing what has become some vehicles that cannot continue to be utilized because of serious repair issues. And hence we see it as emergency in order to continue the service level and to have both the wheel loader, 2 skid steer loaders. There is an emergency need for the replacement of these particular units. But once again, Public Service Committee will get into that in detail in their meeting tomorrow. Moving on to resolutions. We have a resolution authorizing the release of executive session minutes, and there's a listing attached to the memo on what portions of executive sessions, all or a portion, that is being recommended for release. Do you have any questions on those? Moving on to Council Memo 40618. This is a resolution approving a TIF development agreement with Historic Louis Joliet Apartments LLC, 22 East Clinton Street. This was before the Economic Development Committee, and they provided a positive recommendation. You might recall that this has gone back after we got confirmation from HUD that the development could take place both in the market or income rated apartments versus the market rate apartments. This came back, so it does give the developer more flexibility. The amount to be invested is the same, but again, we got a positive recommendation from the Economic Development Committee. Any questions on that? Moving on, Council Memo 40718. This item will be before the Public Service Committee tomorrow. These is appropriating funds for the Marion Street, York Avenue roadway improvement project, and this having to do with ensuring that motor fuel tax can be utilized in the amount of $4,268.50 to PT Farrell Construction Company. The next two memos, Council Memo 40818, appropriating funds for the Smith Avenue, Center Street to Broadway Street roadway improvements of $308,004.98 to PT Farrell. Once again, it has to do with motor fuel tax being allocated to help ensure that that funding source is used to cover this cost. That one and Council Memo 40918, which is well, let me stop there. Yeah, the Public Service Committee will consider Memo 40818 tomorrow. If there's no questions, let me move to this next one. A little unusual, but this resolution 40918 will have the City of Joliet accepting ownership and liability for storm sewers constructed on US Route 30 and Illinois Route 53 for the downtown sanitary and storm sewer improvement project. So this will be before the Public Service Committee tomorrow as well. And last, Council Memo 41018, resolution approving a renewal of the Home Investment Partnership Program consortium agreement between Will County, Illinois and the City of Joliet, Illinois. Unfortunately, the original agreement that was entered into between City of Joliet and Will County expired recently, and there is a critical deadline to seek council approval tomorrow night so that we can be eligible to continue on receiving grants as was reviewed and approved 3 years ago in the original agreement. If there's no agreements with that memo, let's move to bids and contracts. We have a number of contracts, and I believe, let's see, is it, we have one where the Finance Committee's involved too. Council Memo 41218, award of a contract for a generator maintenance contract for 2019-23 to Illinois Power Products for $42,196. Public Service Committee will review that tomorrow. I'll continue on these. Council Memo 41318, a contract for the South Avenue, Center Street to Broadway Street roadway improvement project, PT Farrell, in the amount of $466,242.48. Council Memo 41618, award of a contract for the 2018 traffic signal materials purchase order in the amount of $57,286. A purchase order is done each year to replenish our traffic signal supplies. Council Memo 41718, award a contract for the 2018 electrical materials purchase order in the amount of $40,802 to Gray Bar Services. These types of materials are purchased for use by our electricians to utilize in work that we do in-house. Council Memo 41818, contract to Laramie check the amount of $257,180 to Austin Tyler Construction. So these items 1 through 4 will all be on the Public Service Committee for tomorrow. Is there any questions on any of those I just mentioned? If not, this next one, Council Memo 41818, was before both the Finance Committee and will be on the Public Service Committee tomorrow. You might recall this is the purchase of a computerized maintenance and management system in the amount of $632,975. Even though it talks about this will be from Data Transfer Solutions LLC and approval of a professional services agreement for $162,984 with Black & Veatch. You might recall the term ViewWorks software system. It's the ViewWorks software system that is the recommendation we're bringing to you tonight. A different system was looked at several years ago at a much higher cost. Finance Committee gave a positive recommendation, and the Public Service Committee will comment on that during their meeting tomorrow. Is there any questions you have on this project, on the ViewWorks asset management software system? And then last, the amendments, change orders, and payments. All these council memo 42118, 42218, 42318, 42418, and 42518 will be on the Public Service Committee tomorrow for review and recommendation. Do you have any questions on any of those change orders, payments, or other amendments? Okay, and then I just wanted to, tonight, as we'll do again tomorrow, just wanted to mention again, and if I could, Jim Trisna did an excellent job on the radio this morning, but would you just kind of mention again for the public's benefit of the open house we're gonna have next week on the Hobart Road, Hollywood Avenue, and the new bridge over the Des Plaines River?
Sure. Yeah, not a problem, David. Next Tuesday, August 14th, at Joliet Junior College, we'll have our open meeting for the proposed Hobart Road Extension project. The meeting will be from 4 to 7, kind of a IDOT open house type planned meeting where you can come whenever you ever choose to come in there. We'll have drawings out, display tables of the whole project. There's actually 2 projects there I'll talk about in a moment. But we'll also have a video of a diverging diamond. That's with the interchange type we're going to be doing at Hobart and I-80. A little bit different. We've got 2 in Illinois right now. We have one at Illinois 59 and Interstate 88. And there's another one in Elmhurst. I believe it's at 290, Interstate 290, and might be Illinois 83, but I'm not positive. I've not been to that one. Essentially, that video will show how the diverging diamond interchange works, where basically when you approach the interchange, the traffic is taken to the opposite side of the road. We're used to driving on the right-hand side of the road in our country. We'll go to the left-hand side of the road. What that does is it eliminates the left turns to get onto the exit or entrance ramps across opposing traffic. So there'll be a video presentation, a video of that folks can watch, as well as they'll discuss the 2 sections of the project. There's the public section the city's working on right now that's being generally funded by the state of Illinois, IDOT. That is between I-80 and US 6. And that will go and include the diverging diamond interchange at 80 in Hobart Road, reconstruction of Hobart/Hollywood Drive between 80 and Route 6 to a 5-lane configuration, 2 lanes in each direction, the bi-directional lane or left turn lane in the middle. That project will also include the intersection improvements of US 6 and Hobart Hollywood Road, new traffic signals, additional turn lanes, things of that nature will be included in that part of the project. That project will also include a couple of bridge replacements, bridge over the Rock Run tributary number 3, I think it is a Rock Run South tributary, and modification to the roadway box culverts over the I&M Canal. And the last main section of that project will include extending a separate hiking biking trail. Basically right now that trail splits as you get just south of Rock Creek Boulevard. We'll have it on one side of the road only, and it'll be separate from right now. It's basically like a bi-directional lane. It's actually on both sides of Hobart Road. It'll be a separate hiking biking trail, take you down to the trailhead for the I&M Canal. The private section will be just south of Route 6 to Schweitzer Road. That'll include a 4-lane cross section. You don't need a turn lane there. There's no areas to turn off there essentially until you get down to Schweitzer. Obviously there'll be 5 lanes there. And that'll be the bridge over the new high-level bridge over the Des Plaines River. And again, part of the intent of the this project, bigger picture, is to allow the traffic from the intermodals, both the Joliet intermodal and the Elwood intermodal, to be able to travel north to Interstate 80 without traversing over to Illinois 53 or South Chicago Street and getting on 80 there, which is very, very congested. So a lot of safety involved in this project. Safety, a lot of safety measures will be incorporated as part of this project.
Thank you, Jim. After public comment, we are requesting a closed session for the items listed. So I'll turn the time back to City Clerk.
We'll have public comments, but I did receive a request to hold off on the executive session till tomorrow night.
Oh.
Next is public comments. Craig Lichtenwalter.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Craig Lichtenwalter. I've been a longtime resident of Joliet, and I'm currently living in New Lenox. I'm here regarding the future of the Joliet Slammers. The Joliet Slammers, previously the Jackhammers, have been part of the Joliet community and my life for the past 16 years. What would it mean to the community to lose them? 80,000 to 100,000 less people visiting Joliet each year during baseball season. Many of these people frequent other Joliet businesses before and after the ball games, including places such as Chicago Street Pub, Juliet's, Migraine Brewery, Tin Roof, Elder Brewing, and Harris Casino. Lots of fundraising for local community organizations through things such as silent auctions for special charity jerseys, which has been utilized by the breast cancer awareness and Easter seals, discount game tickets with 50% of the cost going to the organization, 50/50 raffles and other raffle silent auctions held by charitable organizations on concourse during games. Lots of community service provided by not only the Joliet Slammers, front office staff, but by the players. Examples include assisting the revitalization of the Joliet Prison and tornado relief in Coal City, just to name a couple. The loss of Spike Super Students Awards, which provide a free ticket to a home game of the Joliet Slammers to elementary and middle school students who meet academic goals set forth by the classroom, schools, and libraries participating in this program. Loss of community baseball camps hosted by the Joliet Slammers for kids who have dreams of becoming a professional baseball player. For these and so many more reasons, the Joliet Slammers must remain in Joliet. Professional baseball in Joliet is a fun, affordable evening that brings the community together, not only from Joliet, but the surrounding areas. The revitalization of downtown Joliet seems to be a priority with the City Council, yet the thought of losing Joliet Slammers would be a detriment to the continued revitalization projects. Leaving the ballpark empty when you have a willing partner with the community already through the Joliet Slammers. The Joliet Slammers play in the longest continuous independent baseball league in the country, the Frontier League, who this year are in their 26th season. This in itself should show a commitment to the city of Joliet that the Joliet Slammers would like to remain in the league and in Joliet for many years to come. With each season consisting of 48 plus home ball games, and the Frontier League is also one of the top 4 independent baseball leagues in the country. I have personally been a season ticket holder with both the Joliet Jackhammers and Joliet Slammers since the stadium opened for independent baseball in 2002. I have provided ongoing support for not only Joliet baseball, hosting many events including suites during games and renting the stadium for a private event the morning after my wedding 3 years ago. But I also frequent the downtown Joliet businesses on a weekly basis and continue to hype up the downtown Joliet area because I want to see the city succeed. My connection to the city goes as far back as my childhood, with my father owning several businesses in Joliet over the years. The thought of losing the Joliet Slammers and the effect it will have on the downtown area businesses both saddens and scares me. I truly hope the Joliet City Council does the right thing by providing a long-term lease to the Joliet Slammers so we can play ball for many fun-filled baseball seasons to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian Mederich.
Close enough.
Sorry.
I give you D plus. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Brian Madrick, resident for 12 years, formerly from the Palos Hills area. I work for United Insurance Services in Palos Hills, actually Palos Heights. I'm a sales rep for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Illinois, and my family consists of my wife Lisa, my daughter Christina, 22, my son Joseph, 16, and my grandson Braden, who's 4. I'm here to talk about renewing the lease for the Joliet Slammers at Route 66 Stadium for 2019 and beyond. When someone asked me about the Joliet Slammers, and I had a lot of clients in the area, in the Will County, Kendall County area, DuPage, local counties around the area. When they asked me about the Joliet Slammers, one word comes to mind. And what it really comes down to is family. Very simple. No doubt about it. I first met the management of the Slammers in 2015, and that was with Portia Johnson about setting up a table night to hand out marketing material to help people understand insurance regarding Medicare programs and the difficult ACA programs. Since day one, I was treated professionally by all from top to bottom within the organization. I always feel welcome when it is, whether it's being greeted from Ken Miller or ordering a cold beer from Shannon or one of the other concession workers. I used to work as a social worker in the city of Chicago, running a vocational training school. I commend the Slammers' commitment in providing employment to the disabled community of Will County. I see the smile on those people's faces when I interact with them, whether it's guys collecting garbage, janitorial services, whether it's the different guys working on the field. It's really cool to see. My friend Ken Tiffany, who resides in Glendale, Arizona, who visited on June 30th, commented as well. Ken said, hey man, I can't believe the work that they do, with people with disabilities. He runs a couple volunteer programs in Arizona at Camelback Ranch with child literacy and Head Start programs. In 2017, I became a season ticket holder, section 109, row E, seats 1 and 2. Great investment, by the way. I'm able to take my family, friends, and entertaining clients of mine to a night out of baseball fun. I am totally amazed by all the smiles from the kids that are there with their parents. $2 Tuesdays, theme nights like Superhero Night, Star Wars Night, plus Firework Fridays. Those are a lot of fun. What can you not like about bringing families together? That's what it really is. Joliet, I've seen a lot in my 12 years, almost 13 years, and I know there are a lot of challenges ahead. I am an avid Herald subscriber. All the best to Dick Goss. I enjoy his articles. Bob Ocon seems to be on beat all the time, and I always look forward to Joe Hosey's opinion page on Sundays. Makes my day. I am a vested resident in Joliet. I realize that there are many problems that surround Joliet and neighboring communities. I have family members that live in New Lenox, Frankfurt, and a lot of friends in the area as well. Joliet Slammers aren't the problem, ladies and gentlemen. Let's get this lease done. I would like to share a viewpoint from my 4-year-old grandson, Braden, and his team.
So you're at the 4-minute mark, you wrap it up, please.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I didn't bring a timer. So, basically what I'm trying to say, this is a very good event. The police department, the emergency rescue team, and everybody here in Joliet does a really good job. I think this is great, and I'd like to continue to see that go on. Concur with Craig over there, and I think it'd be a huge loss. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak under public comments?
Hello. My name is Mary Ann Barks. I've lived in Joliet for the last 72 years, so been around a while. Came to this meeting, or several of the meetings, and one in St. John's. The mayor did state that he wasn't happy with any of the programs that they were presenting tonight. And and he also stated that we have a unique situation. The city actually owns the building, not some other entity. Yet, when we had someone else propose another scenario, we kind of just glossed over it and kept on going. Didn't ask if anybody else had anything that would improve our situation. Didn't seem to matter. We left Holstein sit up here and talk the entire time. Everybody else got 3 minutes. What are we being, whitewashed? I think you ought to take a broader look at what's going on and consider alternatives to what can be done to make everybody happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
And motion seconded to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Meeting adjourned.